Welcome to Last Week Tonight. I am John Oliver. Thank you for being with us. Lots to get through. A quick recap of the week. If you are watching this show in eastern Ukraine, or as it may be called by the time that this show airs, Western Russia, then please don't worry. Yes, Vladimir Putin is seizing some of your towns like they're Super Bowl rings, but rest assured, the international community is behind you.
If Russia continues on its current course, we have a range of tools at our disposal, including sanctions that would target certain sectors of the Russian economy.
Huh? Sanctions. You're welcome, Ukraine. Everything's going to be fine. That's kind of our go-to move now. We impose sanctions the way that Pizza Hut crams mozzarella into every crevice of a pizza crust. It's kind of what we do when we are completely out of ideas. Unfortunately, this week also showed how little regard Vladimir Putin has for sanctions.
The New York Times is reporting this morning that U.S. sanctions over Ukraine are having a limited impact on Russia as Vladimir Putin demands Ukrainian troops withdraw from the southeastern part of the country.
You know, it's not a really good sign when Vladimir Putin tells you to withdraw troops from your own country.
OK, that is true. But to be fair, it's also not a good sign when Vladimir Putin tells you anything. If Vladimir Putin leans in to whisper something in your ear, your best-case scenario is that he's going to bite your ear off. That's the best thing that could happen to you in that particular circumstance. Now, Ukraine would have been the talk of the town in Washington all this week if they hadn't spent the whole last 7 days party planning for last night.
The White House Correspondents' Dinner, lovingly called Nerd Prom.
We call it the Nerd Prom.
This weekend.
Nerd Prom. Amazingly, it's actually even worse than it sounds. It is an alarming display of coziness where you can see such majestic sights as National Security Advisor Susan Rice asking for an autograph from the guy from Duck Dynasty. Both of them could justifiably look the other one in the eyes and say, "What the fuck are you doing here?" And they'd both be right. It's a night when journalists celebrate their independence by hanging out with their sources and celebrate their importance by utterly ignoring one another in favour of Hollywood stars. In fact, the main purpose of the evening seems to be providing photos of glamorous celebrities completely unaware of who they are standing next to. She has no idea, with the person in question actually usually being Wolf Blitzer. Can I be in the photo? Can I be in your photo? Surely this wasn't what the founders of the Correspondents Association had in mind 100 years ago. In fact, let's take a look at their original charter.
I wish I could show you all that charter, because it's our most prized artifact.
Well, I wish you could show it to me too, then. Now, if you're wondering why he's referring to the charter in the conditional sense, it's because during the renovation of the White House press room, the Correspondents Association handed over their charter for safekeeping and, well...
When they cut the ribbon, the White House had lost our charter.
Oh, well, you weren't really using it anyway. Perhaps you could just replace it with a framed photo of Wolf Blitzer with Sofia Vergara. And now, this.
And now, newscasters enjoying a pun about today's date a little too much.
I'm a massive Star Wars nerd. It's Star Wars Day when we say, May the 4th be with you.
Happy Star Wars Day!
May the 4th be with you.
Nice! Obviously, it's May the 4th be with you. Okay, so I actually speak droid, guys. He just said, May the 4th be with you.
May the 4th be with you. Get it? Let's take on the 4th. May the Force be with you. And there you go.
Today is Star Wars Day. Maybe the 4th one. Or we should say, maybe just the 4th be with you.
Moving on. As you know, our show is dedicated to covering the biggest news of the week, whatever that news may be. We have a long, proud, one-week history of doing that. So, what was the biggest news story of this week?
We begin in Oklahoma tonight with an execution that didn't go as planned.
A convicted killer from Oklahoma dies after a botched execution.
Okay. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, wait, you're not going to really do a comic take on the death penalty, right? It's your second episode. I haven't even decided if I like this show yet. Well, you're right. Don't change the channel. We don't have to talk about the death penalty. No one is forcing us to.
In the application of the death penalty in this country, we have seen significant problems. I think we do have to, as a society, ask ourselves some difficult and profound questions.
Do we? Do we really have to do that? Can you not just answer those questions for us? Because I do not want to talk about the death penalty. And, judging by the noise that you make when you talk about it, neither do you.
What happened in Oklahoma is deeply troubling.
I know that sound. That's the sound of a man drowning on dry land. Desperately hoping for Biden to suddenly walk out into the Rose Garden in an open robe. Oh, God, Joe. Oh, Joe's here. Thank God you're here. Let's lighten the mood, everyone. Let's talk about Benghazi. OK. So let's do this, then. Let's talk about the death penalty. And before you turn this show off, there was a YouTube video this week of tiny hamsters eating tiny burritos. And it's as magical and as uncomplicated as you think. And if you make it to the end of this story, I promise we will watch it together. OK? But you have to stay with us. You have to stay with us to get it. OK, so... the death penalty. Should it exist? And what should its limits be? Can someone give me a broad, almost infantile guideline of when they think it's appropriate?
The Supreme Court has already told us that the death penalty is constitutional. I do believe in the death penalty, but only with respect to those that are guilty of committing the crime.
OK. Bold idea. We shouldn't execute innocent people. I think most people would probably agree with that. You, sir, are a regular Atticus Finch. But executing the innocent is not really the tough question here. It's whether we should be executing the guilty. And let me acknowledge right up front that I come to this as a bit of an outsider. Britain does not have capital punishment, so in a way, I really don't know what I'm talking about. But in another way, I really do know what I'm talking about, because before 1965, we didn't just have capital punishment. We literally went medieval on people's asses.
The history of capital punishment in Britain is a long and bloody one. Since the Middle Ages, those condemned to death have variously faced being boiled alive, burnt at the stake, or hung, drawn and quartered.
Yeah, we did that. We boiled people. And in the grand tradition of British cuisine, if anything, we overboiled them. We boiled them up. We loved killing people so much, we kept coming up with new inventive techniques that looked like they were designed by the Marquis de Sade and named by Willy Wonka.
This is the head crusher. The small and seemingly innocuous thumb biter originates in 14th century Scotland. These devices have almost childlike names, like pennywinkies.
Ooh, that's right, pennywinkies. A delightful English cousin of the throaty tug-tug and the jolly shocky buzz-buzz tickly-wickly seat. And, look, I know that all of this is still technically horrifying, but that's kind of the point. Because whether you are boiling people alive or putting them to sleep with a tiny injection administered by a puppy dressed as Winnie the Pooh, in the end, you are getting the same result. And here's the thing. Just because the British people don't have the death penalty anymore doesn't mean that we don't want it back. Recent polls suggest that at least half the population would choose to have it reinstated, which makes complete sense, because the death penalty is one of those things that is natural to want, but that you shouldn't necessarily have. The death penalty is like the McRib. When you can't have it, it's so tantalising. But as soon as they bring it back, you think, this is ethically wrong. Should this be allowed in a civilised society? And by the way, there is your new slogan, McRib. You are welcome. You are welcome. You can have that for free. That's yours. Because there are things about having the death penalty which might make you a little bit queasy.
What does the United States have in common with Iran, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia? The answer is the death penalty. According to Amnesty International, those four nations and China are responsible for 82% of the world's executions.
Look, this is going to seem like a gross simplification, but any list that contains Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia and China is not a list you want to be on. Ideally, you want to be on one of those lists that Finland is on. Finland is on all the good lists, like countries with the best pastries or best countries to host your overseas lesbian wedding. And I know what some of you are thinking, but John, I hear you saying that most Western countries no longer have executions, but if someone committed a heinous crime, I would still very much like to kill them. OK, well, let's start with if.
There have been 312 DNA exonerations in this country since we've been doing forensic testing.
It is interesting how things which were once considered complete airtight evidence against somebody are now sort of being viewed as junk science.
Isn't it interesting? Is interesting really the word that you're looking for there, Cooper? Facts found on Snapple caps are interesting. The Statue of Liberty's nose is 4 feet 6 inches long. Huh, that's an interesting fact. But facts like innocent people are potentially executed by our government on a regular basis are not so much interesting as fucking horrifying. Put it this way, if you found that on the bottom of a Chobani lid, that would make a container of Chobani even harder to swallow than it already is. And look, statistics suggest that false convictions aren't all that rare.
Just this week, we are learning from the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences a study that shows 4% of death row inmates are innocent.
I think you might be using the wrong tone. 4%! Well, the outrage about this must be off the charts. I remember a certain Texas governor who felt that 4 individual cases of voter impersonation in the last decade was a moral issue important to address.
I think any person who does not want to see fraud believes in having good, open, honest elections, transparent. Well, we take it to the Supreme Court.
To the Supreme Court? Over a voter impersonation rate essentially close to 0%. So a potential executing the innocent rate of 4% must really eat away at Rick Perry.
Your state has executed 234 death row inmates, more than any other governor in modern times. Have you struggled to sleep at night with the idea that any one of those might have been innocent?
No, sir, I've never struggled with that at all.
Nope. I never struggled with it. In fact, I sleep great. Like a big, muscular baby. 14 hours a night, legs in the air with a mobile above my head. Crying when I shit myself. I'm a big baby. I sleep like a baby. But okay. Let's imagine for a moment a magical world where you could be sure of someone's guilt. What are the arguments for killing them then? Is it that it's a deterrent to others?
There is no credible evidence that the death penalty is a particular deterrent to violent crime.
Although, to be fair, the death penalty is an amazing deterrent to fishing without a licence. Listen, Todd, I'd love to go with you, but is it worth it? You've got a wife and children. So, what about the argument, then, that we shouldn't have to pay to house and feed a convicted killer?
An average death penalty case cost the state millions of dollars. In California alone, since 1978, the total cost of enforcing the death penalty has been over $4 billion. That's $308 million for each of the 13 executions carried out.
In fact, it costs up to 10 times more to give someone the death penalty than life in prison. So what a death sentence is really saying is, hey, this is America. And the way we treat the most despicable members of our society is by spending the entire budget of the Lord of the Rings trilogy on them. So what we know now is the death penalty is expensive, potentially kills innocent people, and doesn't deter crime. And here is where it gets hard. Harder than is potentially appropriate for a comedy show late on a Sunday night. But if we are going to answer difficult and profound questions, as the President told us to, the toughest one is probably, if someone is guilty of committing a horrible crime and the family of the victim want the perpetrator executed, do we want to live in the kind of country that gives that to them? I would say no. You might very reasonably say yes, or, at the very least, But it's a question that is going to need an answer. And in the meantime, a much easier question is, do you want to watch a YouTube video of a tiny hamster eating a tiny burrito? Because at this point, you have fucking earned it. Is how you end a comprehensive segment on the death penalty. And now, this.
America. Everyone knows it's the greatest nation on earth, and our leaders are the greatest leaders on earth. But did you know there are other countries that are not America, and each of them has a leader of its very own? Let's take a moment to meet one in our ongoing series, Other Countries, Presidents of the United States. This week's leader,
François Hollande.
François Hollande.
François Hollande.
Frankie Holland. That's right, François Hollande, the President of France, the country where your cousin spent a 3-month semester abroad, and the rest of his life overemphasizing the word croissant. Interestingly, Hollande is rare among world leaders in that he's publicly questioned the existence of God, which perhaps explains why, on his inauguration day, this happened.
Hollande is on his way to meet with German Chancellor Angela Merkel in Berlin when his plane was hit by lightning.
Hollande is also a committed socialist, not only believing that France should have a public investment bank and that the country's retirement age should begin at 60, but also that his body should be shared with as many French women as possible. Yes, François is probably most famous for his love life, which rivals that of France's notorious President Le Pew.
We can do away with the dull preliminaries.
Hollande had 4 children with Ségolène Royal, a fellow socialist who also ran for president, only to lose to Nicolas Sarkozy. Hollande chose to comfort his partner by leaving her for his younger mistress, Valérie Trierweiler. An act so heartless, the French people decided to punish him by electing him to the highest office in the land. But wait, there's more. Hollande then cheated on his mistress with another mistress, sneaking out of the presidential palace to meet her for a rendezvous on a scooter, a sequence of events so stereotypically French, it's almost offensive. So tonight, we introduce you to François Hollande, a man who dumped a presidential candidate and became president himself, a man who evicted the First Lady from the presidential palace, an action which somehow increased his approval ratings, and the only man in the world who's managed to pick up a gorgeous movie star mistress while riding around on a scooter. Who says there's no God?
Let's move on. There was big news this week out of Brunei. Wait, let me back up for a second. There is a country called Brunei. It's located here in Southeast Asia. Specifically, it's located here on the island of Borneo. Anyway, there was big news from Brunei this week.
At a ceremony on Wednesday morning,
the Sultan announced that Brunei's experiment with Sharia law had begun.
OK, fine. No need to get alarmed. We all know that Sharia law is just one of those scary terms that your grandma sends you email forwards about because a guy who looked a little bit Muslim cut in front of her at the grocery store. So what does this new law entail?
In about a year, those guilty of theft or consuming alcohol will be punished with a whipping or even amputations. And in 2 years, the death penalty will be implemented for crimes like blasphemy, sodomy, or insulting the Quran.
Holy shit. I guess this explains Brunei's new slogan, Brunei is for lovers only within the strict bounds of heterosexual marriage. Now, I know I should be careful here, and maybe this Sultan is just a devout, pious man obeying the strict tenets of his faith.
He's worth more than $20 billion. He owns a fleet of more than 5,000 luxury cars and his own 747. Now, his family includes 12 children by 3 wives, lives in a 1,788-room palace.
OK, so I'm not really getting humility off of this so much as Donald Trump times Richard Branson to the Scrooge McDuck power. But his incredible display of wealth was the surprise party that he threw for himself back in 1996.
It has been Brunei's most lavish party ever, a 2-week, $25 million bash thrown by Sultan Hassan al-Bolkiah for his 50th birthday. Michael Jackson, said to be the Sultan's favorite pop star, gave a public concert. As a gift to the fans, the Sultan picked up the tab for the concert, which he did not attend.
Wow! He did not attend. That is a power move. You fly Michael Jackson around the world to perform for you, and then you don't turn up to the concert. Oh, so I'm just too rich to give a shit. And it's not just wealth. It's a little hard to take strict moral guidelines from a man whose own brother owned, and this is true, a yacht called Tits, with service boats called Nipple 1 and Nipple 2. At that point, you're not the moral authority of your country, you're just Jeremy Piven with money. Now, the Sultan's brother even stocked his estate on Long Island with these actual graphic statues of himself having sex. I'd say that's not classy, but to be honest, it's the classiest thing on Long Island. Come at me. Come at me. So rank hypocrisy, vicious anti-homosexuality laws, and yet a conspicuous lack of condemnation this week from any major countries. And that's because Brunei falls under the Saudi Arabia rule. If you're a tiny, wealthy, strategically located country with oily business underneath you, the whole world is your friend. Do you remember the British royal wedding? Because the Sultan certainly does.
And here we have the Sultan of Brunei coming in. Sultan Haji Hassan al-Bolkiah, and he is there with his wife.
Yeah, he was there, and he had good seats too, because who's that over William's shoulder? There he is, literally courtside. If something had gone wrong, he could have tapped in and got himself wife number 4. And also, remember the last G20 summit? Because guess who's there? It's the Sultan of Brunei. Brunei is not even in the G20. The Sultan just doesn't give a shit and he turns up anyway. He has had face-to-face sit-downs with each of the last 3 presidents.
It is a great pleasure to welcome my good friend, His Majesty the Sultan of Brunei.
Just for context, Brunei has a population of, and this is true, 420,000 people. For scale, the population of Staten Island is 470,000. And yet somehow I don't remember ever seeing Staten Island Borough President James P. Molinaro getting a sit-down with the president. Although, to be honest, he is a lot less fun than the Sultan. Molinaro's last big birthday took place at a Sizzler with entertainment from a Jermaine Jackson impersonator. I'm kidding. It was actually far less exciting than that.
And a happy birthday to our borough president, James Molinaro, who turned 80 years young Friday. He received flowers and several phone calls in his office. I'm going to guess that none of those were from the president.
And the sad thing is, we in America are on such a roll of condemning anti-gay legislation around the world in places like Uganda or, of course, recently in Russia.
I have no patience for countries that try to treat gays or lesbians or transgender persons in ways that intimidate them or are harmful to them.
I have no patience, although, to be honest, I might try and build some up. You never know when it'll come in handy. Because there was no public statement on Brunei's laws from the State Department at all this week. We even called them. And we're nobody. They explicitly told us that. Although there was one group this week that took a stand.
It's also led to several celebrities boycotting the Beverly Hills Hotel, which the Sultan owns.
I've got to say, congratulations to the city of Los Angeles. It cannot have been easy, within a week, to discover you have a worse billionaire owner than this guy. So the most public statement of condemnation this week came from, and this is true, Ellen's Twitter feed, where she said she would be boycotting hotels that the Sultan owns. Take that, Sultan. You might get a pass from every single government on Earth, but you do not piss off the People's Republic of Ellen. You don't do it. You don't do that. You don't do it. And I've got to say, it's too bad, because the Sultan was one of my favourite Ellen guests. Look at him dance. That's just natural rhythm. But you know who I feel for the worst, other than everyone in Brunei over this? Their tourism authority. Because they're going to have to change their ads now.
When it's time to go back to the values of sincerity and purity, there is always Brunei. Brunei Darussalam, a kingdom of unexpected treasures.
It's nice. It looks very nice. But I'm afraid you are going to want to change at least the end of that.
Brunei Al Darussalam. We're on top of a shit ton of oil. What have you got?
Nothing is the answer. And now this.
And now, people falling asleep behind politicians.
Understand that your success in life won't be determined just by what's given to you or what happens to you.
There's no one that can outcompete us. There is no country in the world that can outcompete us.
When you ask me next time, I'll have the answer about whether I even could.
And our allies are so much less willing to trust us.
We need to make sure that the American people are given just a fighting chance.
We must do these things together, as one nation and one people.
Corporate Japan's going to overtake the United States of America.
The common refrain is more Karen, less Rick, but I'm working on it.
And there are folks on the left who do the same thing, trying to be purposely provocative, saying the meanest, nastiest things you can say about the other side.
The social problems they have to deal with are incomprehensible.
We stand for freedom and hope and opportunity.
I know that you can do it. After all, you are the giants. And with the education you've gotten here, there's nothing you can't do.
For more Last Week Tonight, including an interview we did with Simon Ostrowski of ViceNews.com, check out our website here. Thank you so much for watching. Please do join us again next week. Have a great night.